Hello, everybody, and welcome to Behind the Scenes, a podcast where we explore the intersection of art, culture, and big ideas. I'm your host, Sean Malone, creative director for the Foundation for Economic Education and creator of Out of Frame, video essay series on YouTube, here with Paul Nelson and Jennifer Mofsanti. How are you guys doing?
Doing pretty good.
Yeah, hanging in there.
Yeah, it's just, we're recording this like right at Thanksgiving, or just very, very close to Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
And so today we're going to do kind of a Thanksgiving themed, a little bit themed episode. It's two movies that we want to talk about that have a little bit of a appreciation theme to them, or at least for me, I think we can draw out some of that on both of these movies. But before we get to Mr. Holland's Opus, which is going to be the main one that we talk about, and then we'll do Secondhand Lions for our Patreon bonus section. So if you're not a patron, please check us out on patreon.com/outofframeshow. You can stick around for the bonus content we do right after the main episode here. But before we get to that, Jen, you've been watching Legend of Korra.
Yes, I have.
You're finally working your way through all of this.
Finally, yes. We finally got through season 3 of Legend of Korra.
It's the Zahir season.
Yes, that is the Zahir season.
Is
and it...
probably my favorite season.
I think it's
Honestly.
mine too. Granted, I haven't finished season 4 yet.
Yeah.
However, season 3 is a very strong contender.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
Yes. Zahir, for those of you who have not watched Legend of Korra, is a...
Why are you looking at me like that?
Because you have not watched it, sir.
It's like the running theme on this show. It's like, Paul. No. Paul was like, I was watching football instead.
Sports.
Books.
Sports.
Ew.
I listen to my books.
To be fair, I also listen to my books at this point. But yeah. Anyway.
Savages.
But
the
Zahir.
lot of you. Zahir.
Henry Rollins.
Henry Rollins. Yes.
Does anybody know who Henry Rollins
Well,
is?
they
Is
should.
the other side of the question.
He was the singer from Black Flag.
Yeah, punk rocker Henry Rollins.
Yes. Old school punk rocker. And he's still an interesting dude.
He is.
Like,
Yeah.
very handsome, very odd man.
Yeah, both true. Kind of angry still, just kind
Yeah.
of funny.
Very funny, though.
At least, especially being, like a middle-aged dude. He probably has kids. I don't know if he has kids or not. I don't know. Anyway,
I don't know.
It's odd to me to see guys like that, or even maybe worse, like guys like Johnny Rotten, like today, where you go like, he is a 70-year-old
It's kind of sad.
70-year-old punk rocker.
It's kind of sad.
Just like, all right, cool.
Just didn't grow up.
I mean, it's no different than, your Mick Jagger, or, Keith Richards.
Mick Jagger takes responsibility for his 33 kids.
Right.
I give or take a few.
Presumably. Good grief.
I don't know.
Anyway.
But
Legend of Korra.
Legend of Korra. Zahir is the villain of season 3. And he is a self-proclaimed anarchist. And he's trying to return the world to its natural chaotic state, according to him.
Yeah.
And it makes for some interesting viewing and some interesting thinking afterwards.
He's
I've
one of
been
my
really digging it.
Oh, it's got to be great to watch that with kids about your kids' age. too.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff to talk about with that. Zahir is, Jen and I were talking about this before the show started, but like a lot of people see anarchy as chaos, right? But we don't typically think of it that way. We think of it as voluntarism fundamentally, just, any non-coercive, social arrangement or interpersonal arrangement between people is anarchic in the sense that it has there's no master or boss or anybody telling you that you have to do this way or that way or whatever. So in reality, and there's some good memes, I feel like, from some of our friends that I've seen over the years, which is like, showing on one hand, like, this is anarchy, and it's just like a couple farmers with like, collecting rainwater that they're currently illegally collecting or what have you.
Unlicensed fruit stands.
Unlicensed fruit stands, right? Versus this is not anarchy, which is people like smashing windows and
burning buildings down.
burning buildings and stuff. And that's how I look at it. But
This is something that libertarians have a problem with, and that's branding.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think this is one of those where you lost the battle on that word.
Yeah.
Like, you gotta find something else to describe it.
I think to a large extent you're correct about that, because I do think, like, at this point, anytime news or anybody says anarchist, what they mean is, just radical.
Right. Radical, going to destroy someone else's stuff. And
even
though-
Joker types just want to watch the world burn.
Just want to watch the world burn. Yeah.
I think a lot of people who are actually anarchists have moved away from that term a lot and more towards like
Thus.
agorism and voluntarism.
Yeah.
And those sound a
Which
lot
now
nicer.
they're just words that nobody's ever heard.
Voluntarism,
Yeah.
it's a weird word,
It
but
is
it makes sense.
It does make sense.
It makes a lot more sense than anarchist.
Yeah.
It is rather self-explanatory.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't have to work that hard with that one, which, is, and that I do think there is a lot of branding issues that come back to us, to haunt us on things like that sometimes, where it is like you're using a word that's not really very well suited for.
Right. I
for
mean,
the
words
purpose.
words change meaning
Yeah.
in our language. And
Yeah.
I mean, there's examples of that
Yeah.
throughout.
Well,
So
you can definitely lose control. Mm-hmm. And, either give it up, although there's people who've taken words back or taken words in a different direction later on. But it just, I agree. It doesn't tend to be a battle that I really feel like it's super worth fighting.
yeah, because once
most
you
of the
get
time.
somebody who's like, okay, so anarchy is not that bad, but then you've wasted how many
Yeah. right.
seconds of your life?
Anyway, Legend of Korra, though, it really probably is my favorite season because it is the most interesting of the seasons. I think in a lot of ways it has the most compelling villain and the most clear villain. I think in Zahir. Zahir's mission is to him, it's super, super clear. He knows exactly what he's going for. His actions throughout that whole season align to his motives and to his mission, and it's really, really, it's just super well written. And honestly, like, Legend of Korra is okay. I don't like it as much as I like Avatar for a lot of reasons, but that season in particular is a real standout for me.
Yeah, and I really liked the exploration of how the Order of the White Lotus went from this secret society that we all root for because we love Uncle Iroh, to just kind of this bureaucratic sort of, I don't know, order of babysitters kind of thing. It's terrible.
Is this a cartoon?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, I really know nothing about the show.
No, so the interesting thing, so what Legend of Korra does is it takes where the original series left off, and then it's, I don't know.
I think it's like 60
Let's
years
call it about
later?
60 years later.
Thereabouts.
So there's-
I'm sure people will say, what?
There's like another series like Korra, and then
So
Legend?
there's Avatar.
Oh, okay. So
Avatar:
it's in
The
this-
Last Airbender.
Same universe.
Yeah, you
universe.
gotta explain it to me like I'm 5 right
Okay,
now, guys.
so same universe,
Okay.
and Korra is the next Avatar. So when the lead character
Yep.
Aang, the first series after he dies,
After M. Night Shyamalan killed him.
after M. Night Shyamalan killed him, he the Avatar is reincarnated in another person that happens to be Korra, but now we are into the future of this society, and this society is now sort of steampunky. It's now like industrialized. It's got factories and cars, and it's very like, again,
Airships.
steampunk, airships.
Yeah.
It's that whole kind of thing. And so it's a cool premise, and especially one of the things I like about it, which I always actually have an issue with shows that set up magic, but then don't use magic for work, which I think is fascinating, is that it actually uses, firebenders and stuff to like heat boilers so that they can power their engines and power electricity and stuff like that. So they're actually using the magic users to create value for people, to create jobs, basically, so that they're powering a more interesting society.
I also really liked that they invented
cool.
a professional sport
Yeah.
for magic users. It's
now
really
it's
great.
just it's like
You guys might have just hooked me.
Yeah,
It's actually
you
a
would dig
really
this
cool sport.
because this is the
It's great.
majority of the first season. Actually, is all about Korra trying to convince her mentor to allow her to participate in the professional bending sport. To go in and
So like,
Yeah.
So is there a ball or is there like
no.
tasks?
So basically, it's sort of it's sort of sumo wrestling in a way. I guess that's the easiest way I could describe it. Your goal is to push all of your opponents off a platform, off the other side.
Yeah. Simple enough for me.
Simple, and you can, to do that, you incorporate all of your various powers, and there's earth that you can throw at people, or you can launch water at people, or whatever it is.
Look at that.
It's actually a really cool sport, and
There's rules, it's fun.
There's rules. There's the 1920s radio announcer.
Yeah.
It's outstanding. You would really like that part.
You would actually like that.
Sports.
Got a background, but anyway, let's talk about. Let's shift gears entirely and talk about Mr. Holland's Opus. I was going to try to do a segue. There's not much of a segue between these two, but that's okay.
Not at all.
Could have done something with hot air with firebending in this movie.
Yeah,
They both include radios.
So Mr. Holland's Opus is a 1995 movie that I hadn't seen in many, many years.
It's been a long time for me too.
I think for the majority of the audience, maybe haven't seen it at all. And it's interesting to me because I remember growing up feeling like this was a really important movie. It was a movie that everybody I knew had talked about or kind of knew about or whatever. And now I don't know that anybody really talks about it as much as they had. And then we were even talking to, one of the guys that works with us, recently today, and he'd never heard of it before at all. So, that's fine. But the movie is Richard Dreyfuss stars as Glenn Holland, who is a musician, composer who wants to, at the start of the movie anyway, he wants to take a break from touring as probably a piano player, I would assume, and work as a teacher, as a music teacher at a high school for long enough for him to write his grand opus, his great symphonic composition.
Yes.
Which we'll get to later. I have many issues with that.
I'm sure you do.
It's a whole thing that we'll have to get into.
We'll get there.
Point. But he takes this gig basically because he wants some time to work on other stuff. Doesn't like teaching. Kind of hates the job. Immediately just doesn't get along with the students. Can't figure out how to connect with them. And the movie is basically him learning over time how to be a better teacher, how to connect with students, and then it's got a little bit of a maudlin sort of like teachers are heroes kind of public school teachers kind of vibe to it, in the same way of like Dead Poets Society or Stand and Deliver or something like that. You all right?
Sorry, aborted sneeze there.
But it's interesting because I didn't have. It was fine. For the most part, I hadn't seen it in a long time. I remember everybody talking a lot about it and making a big deal out of it, and it's sort of critically well received. And then I kind of rewatched it, and I was like, I really don't like the third act.
Yeah.
It kind of goes into, like, I just feel like they needed a way to create some added drama to get him to retire, or like sort of the end of the life. The other thing that's kind of strange about this movie in general is that it is not a period of his life. It is literally his entire teaching career.
Yeah. It's like 30 years worth.
Plus years. Yeah. From the 60s to the 90s, basically. Probably like late 60s to like 1995, I think is like basically
his first
where it's at.
His first teaching year was the 64, 65.
Yeah, actually, yeah, you're right. So that's like 40 years of teaching.
No, it's 30.
Oh, yeah, 30 years. Yeah, you're right.
Ended in 95.
Yeah. So a long time, good long career. I don't know. There's a lot I wanted to talk about as far as Out of Frame is concerned, though, because I think that there's a couple really, really like consistent lessons in this. I think one is like something that Fee talks about a lot, which is value creation and finding that intersection of where the things that you do and that you're passionate about and that you want to do actually, provide value to other people, know? He struggles with that tremendously at the beginning of the movie, and most of the movie is him sort of slowly figuring out how to do that better. The other thing I'd really like to get everybody's thoughts on is this idea of sort of entrepreneurial freedom inside a career, inside a job. Because once he finds ways to connect with his students, he does so outside of what is approved as far as the curriculum is concerned, or at least what his vice principal, played by William H. Macy, the squarest,
The squarest of
squares. So Mr. Holland figures out that his students, shocker, they like rock and roll.
Ooh.
And in his music appreciation class, he teaches rock and roll so that he can explain
How it got there.
Yeah.
Which, having been through several music appreciation classes, is kind of how you do it.
Yeah.
You start with rock or jazz. We used to call it rock for jocks in college because
Nice.
music appreciation was the music elective that people could take outside of the school.
Yep.
Jazz for jocks or rock for jocks. Those are the two. But it makes sense. And then, of course, in the 60s, the squares just weren't happening.
Oh, no.
Right. Devil's
Absolutely.
music.
The devil's
Devil's.
music.
Devil's tempting us.
Yeah. So I want to talk about both of those things because I think the big early kind of moment for Mr. Holland in his teaching career, we can talk about his family life and stuff too, but in his teaching career, it's that moment where he gets hauled into the principal's office to be berated by the vice principal about teaching rock and roll, and that the principal actually accepts his choice to teach rock and, justifies it, finds a way to justify it to the board, the school board and state board of educators or whatever it is, But I want to go back to this and think like, what would have his, because he's lauded at the end as being like this great teacher who
Yes.
impacted all these lives. Could he have done that had he been told by the state board of education, no, you're not allowed to teach that way. You have to teach Mozart, and that's the end of it.
Of course not.
Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, that's a really, it's something that this movie doesn't touch on inside the movie, but I think it's super important.
Yeah, so I have a lot of thoughts about Mr. Holland. First off, I kind of hated this movie
It's fair.
from start to end. It was pretentious. Of some background, I had seen this movie in public school. I had teachers that showed it, and sometimes multiple times a year, different teachers, different classes.
Yeah.
So and that same with Dead Poet Society. So it just drives home. Some teachers are great.
It's so self-serving.
It is
too,
so-
to
it's
be a
just-
teacher and be like, here, watch this movie about how amazing teachers are.
And I didn't remember picking up of how terrible of a person, because I wasn't paying attention. Mr. Holland was, but
Yeah.
he is a terrible person, a terrible father, and just a narcissist to the nth degree. So I couldn't like him.
He is not particularly likable.
No.
Not even at the end of the movie. I feel like he's
No.
still not particularly
Just-
likable.
Grumpy.
He is.
He's so grumpy the whole time.
He also, to be fair, he also reminds me. I talked about this in the Entrepreneur Week session a little bit that we did, which I think will be online if you guys want to. Anybody in the audience wants to check out the panel that I did with my friends Austin Wintry and Kevin Lieber and Afua Richardson. But I talked about this a little bit in there. It's like I've known people over the years who get really bitter about not really succeeding as composers or creators, artists of different stripes. And the running theme that cuts across everyone that I've ever met is that they are kind of narcissistic. They're people who believe that they are sort of geniuses and that everybody else who doesn't fall in line and just praise them and appreciate their work is somehow inferior to them. And that the only reason that they're not as successful as they should be is because everybody else, all the people in the audience,
It's just an idiot.
They're an idiot who just doesn't get it. They don't understand. And Mr. Holland is kind of that guy.
Very much so.
I'll reserve this for later, but I have a lot of thoughts on, again, going back to this value creation idea and then going into his actual, Michael Kamen wrote the music for this. And by the way, Michael Kamen was a fantastic composer, but, the opus, the actual song is not good.
Yeah.
And the piece of music that Mr. Holland has supposedly been working on for 30 years. And this is another little piece of, don't do that. If you're a creator, don't work on something for 30 years.
Don't do that.
Finish it. If it's bad, start over.
Start over. Yeah.
Do another one.
Do something different.
Do something different.
Try something different.
You'll thank me for this advice. I promise you. It will be way, way better for you to just finish, get it done, get the project done, and move on. But Mr. Holland doesn't do that. He just toils away.
Keeps on banging away at his piano, not talking to his son.
Not talking to his son or his wife or...
Yes.
Yeah.
Throwing pencils.
Throwing pencils.
I thought that was weird, too. He conducted with a pencil.
Budget cuts.
Budget cuts.
Can't afford that.
Yeah, there are a couple moments in this movie where they get into the budget cuts thing, which kind of enrages me a little bit. It's a common trope, and it's something that I've heard, and I think we've all heard since I was a little kid. Every single year, public schools, budgets are being slashed, and programs are being cut, and all of this stuff. But if you actually look at the data on any of this, and this goes back for, 60, 70 years at this point, it goes up every single year. The actual per pupil spending.
Even when adjusted for inflation, I want to make that very, very clear because we're going to get comments.
Very explicitly, I want to say the numbers I'm about to read to you are adjusted for inflation. They are held constant in 2018 dollars in this case. But in 1960, it was about $3,061 per student being spent on average across all public schools. Mm-hmm. By 1980, that had doubled to $6,746 per student. By 2016, it doubled again to $12,794 per student. This is constant dollars. This is not
right.
This is not money being inflated. This is apples to apples comparison here. We are spending 4 times as much today per student than we did in 1960 when Mr. Holland started, and the tone of everything at the beginning of the movie is like, oh, he's got money to teach band and all of this stuff.
Right.
Well, if he had money on a quarter of what we're spending now, the big question everybody should be asking is what happened to the rest of it, right? What happened to the 75% of the increase that somehow didn't make it to his class, right? And well, the answer is it went to the square.
It went right to the squares.
It went to
administration.
The administration and the school boards and stuff like that. It's $250,000 a year salaries for school board superintendents or school superintendents and stuff like that. So, but of course the movie makes this point of like, we got to cut the arts. We got to cut the whole arts program.
All of it.
Drama.
It was so successful though.
Right. Right.
So it makes no sense.
It's just that stuff is a little weird because it is like supposedly this ultra successful band program they do, and I've been around all that stuff. I mean, my high school did not have that kind of like ultra successful band program, though band was more successful than our athletics when I was growing up. And so band actually did still get more attention from the school administration and from everything else. It wasn't the best band in the world, but it was still better. And almost every extracurricular kind of thing that you could do, marching band, pep bands, stuff like that, we did. And we had all of that stuff. We had access to drums. It wasn't a very big band because I mentioned this on the series a bunch of times. I didn't go to a very big school, but, still we didn't.
The high school that I went to took its fine arts and extracurriculars extremely seriously. And I went to a public school in a suburb of Birmingham, Alabama. All right? I want to make that exceptionally clear. As far as public schools go, it was very, very good. We had an excellent band program. We had an excellent choral program. Yeah. And we had also visual arts. We had computer science classes. I took creative writing when I was a senior in high school. That's not a class that most people get offered at public schools. And within the band, there was the marching band, there was the symphonic band, there was the jazz band. And for the choir, which I participated in, there was the bog standard one. And then we also had like the women's choir and the men's choir and the show choir and on and on and on. Like anything that you cared to do. Yeah. The choir teacher taught AP music theory at my high school. Like it was a lot. And like...
Yeah, I think the thing for me is
parents would have rioted if they tried to cut the fine arts program at my high school.
Parents would have. I mean, according to the logic of the movie itself, parents would have absolutely rioted because Mr. Holland's like everybody's favorite teacher
for
like
reasons that
important.
are not entirely clear.
And by the way, he taught the governor of the state.
Yeah.
And she's just going to let them.
She's just going to like, it's totally it's out of my hands.
My wife made that comment right when we saw that, when she came in for this. My biggest problem with the film is really the third act. I think the rest of it I tend to go along with, but the third act gets into, the sort of more political aspect of it where it's talking about budget cuts and whatnot. But then it also culminates with this final, very important. I mean, ultimately what you need a way to have Mr. Holland retire, having learned all of these wonderful, this is the ideal, right?
Yeah.
Like you have him retire, having learned all of these wonderful lessons about, how to connect with people and how to be a better person and how to be a better teacher, ideally a better father, which he sort of learned, but we talk about that more in a second. Mm. But you need him to retire because what you ultimately need is for him to have learned all these lessons and connected with all of these other people, but never achieved his dream for himself of writing and performing this, this symphony or whatever, And so the third act of the movie is the battle with the school board and all that junk, but really culminating in, his students coming together and saying, "Hey, we're going to do something nice for him after this whole 30-year career. Now we're going to put together his music and we're going to play it and we're going to make a big show of honoring him and thanking him." Thus the Thanksgiving sort of connection here is the gratitude that everybody sort of expresses at the end to Mr. Holland and his impact on them. The problem is the governor shows up. The governor is the first person he actually successfully reaches, I guess, as a student. She's a clarinet player struggling and eventually becomes the governor. And yet again, she does not do anything, even though clearly would in this context, to, sort out the budget situation for the school because it's state funded. This is exactly what they would do. But also, to be super blunt, the music is awful. And it's frustratingly bad for me because it doesn't take into consideration any of the things that we've learned about the character. So it doesn't fit him.
Yeah.
The music itself, we're told that he's a big John Coltrane fan. He likes the Beatles. He's very moved by Beethoven and stuff like that. The music that we hear is the worst cue of the entire score, but it's just fairly generic film score fanfare, sort of heroic end music. But it also just as...
It's not even reminiscent of Gershwin.
No,
either.
Yeah, Gershwin, you would think that they would have brought that back because they make a big deal out of a bunch of Gershwin songs.
Yeah.
Because they do a little review. No, there's nothing about it. It's nothing about it that's memorable. I turned to my wife afterwards and I was like, now, literally we just watched this. I paused it and I go, okay, now, hum for me the main theme of what you just heard.
It would just be a constant
Couldn't
tone.
do it. Yeah.
Just
couldn't do it.
That's what this movie was to me. Just
I think I get maybe 5 notes.
that's impressive.
Well,
I just remember the electric guitar and you're like, what?
I am not a musician nearly on the level that Sean is, but I played piano for years. I was in the choir for years and years. I have a good ear and a good memory for that kind of thing, and even then, completely forgettable.
Oh yeah, it's totally forgettable. And then to your point, Paul, about the guitar, the thing that enrages me about it really is that it's hard to explain this to people in some ways because I think people don't think about music following the same rules of good storytelling as other aspects of filmmaking. But if you had a character, imagine you have a character that just veers out of left field, just does something completely different from what everything is established about what they would do and what it doesn't make sense. And in this context, the music is film score, but it only makes sense for the audience, and it doesn't make sense at all. But the people that it's not character driven, it's audience driven. So it's saying like, oh, there's this guitar, or there's this clarinet part, or there's this thing. And it just picks up little pieces of like all of the people that he inspired or whatever, all have their one little moment. But if you think about the character, Mr. Holland didn't write this for his band or for a hodgepodge of random people that he influenced over the course of his life. He wrote it to be a symphony or something. We never totally know. But
No.
But we assume and should assume he wrote it to be. He calls it the American Symphony, for goodness sakes.
Yeah.
So we should assume that this is actually for a standard orchestration, probably strings, possibly a wind symphony, probably a wind symphony, because he seems like he's that kind of guy. But regardless, what we hear is meant to hit our heartstrings. But it doesn't work because now it's completely out of character and out of style for everything else. It just doesn't make any sense. And it's just not good. No. Which is frustrating because, again, Michael Kamen's great. He was a great composer. So, I don't know. That's just always been super frustrating to me. I mean, just think about, actually, a lot of these, by the way, did you realize, sorry, going back up here because I was pulling up, just so I don't forget anything, a list of some of my favorite things Michael Kamen did. Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. Band of Brothers, Brazil, Highlander, all the Die Hard movies, all the Lethal Weapon movies. Super, super talented film composer.
And then this.
And then this. Well, but this is a movie about music, about a composer, right? So why not? I don't know. Yeah. That's frustrating. But I will say, while I came back up here, directed by Stephen Herrick, also directed The Mighty Ducks, incidentally. Which I was surprised to learn.
So he's the director of the 90s.
He was like the mid-90s.
He is the director of The Mighty Ducks and Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure.
Yeah, so.
And I wrote down Dolly Parton's Coat of Many Colors, which, if you recall, it's like a Netflix movie a couple years ago. Dolly Parton movie.
So his career is doing great.
Yeah, wonderfully.
I will say that Dolly Parton is a national treasure.
Dolly Parton is a national treasure.
She deserved a better director than that.
Yes, yes, she did. The other thing, let's talk about the other piece of this, which is sort of him as a father, because I wrote down one idea here when I was taking notes, and I thought there's an element to this film that is sort of about what is the price of success, I guess, but it's so thin because he's a public school teacher. And like, I'm not trying to be like super terrible about public school. My mom was a public school teacher, but like, we're not talking about somebody.
Be careful.
Going on tour. It's too late. Already gone there. We're not talking about somebody going on tour and becoming the best composer of all time. We're not talking about somebody so we just talked about the Queen's Gambit recently. And we're talking like a lot of the Queen's Gambit is about sort of the insane obsessiveness that goes towards becoming best in the world at something.
Yeah.
There is no best in the world here. There is a guy who figured out how to do a job okay. That's true. Like I'm being a little bit mean about it, but I'm not really, because that is actually what he did. Yeah. He didn't become the greatest teacher that's ever lived. He became a competent teacher who impacted 40 or 50 people, like in a really meaningful way over a 30-year time span. Yeah. Which is cool and important. And I've had a handful of decent teachers and they've made an impact on my life and everything else. But that level of obsessiveness is not necessary to get to where he got. No. And yet, that's kind of how the movie plays it. Like, he has to ignore his own son.
His only son.
Only child. Who is deaf. Can't even be bothered to learn sign language because he's too busy with
his
whatever.
Opus?
Right.
With his...
Which he's never actually writing.
With his music appreciation teaching
Right.
course.
Right.
And that's tough.
Or arrangements for marching band or whatever. Right?
Yeah, the marching band. Okay, that's starting to get more time constraints, and
Sure.
but
Not that much.
you still got to learn how to communicate with your child.
Yeah.
I mean, goodness.
Yeah.
Before this last viewing, I hadn't seen this movie since I had children, right? And so I'm coming back to this with fairly fresh eyes after having parented 2 boys for 10 years,
Yeah.
you know? And God, he was bad at it. Like, just, you cannot
Yeah.
function in a family like that. You cannot
No.
be in a relationship with your spouse and just ignore them the whole time. You can't basically ask them to give up their photography career so that they can raise this surprise baby. Okay? And then as soon as you find out that your child physically cannot enjoy the thing that is most important to you,
Yeah.
screw it. Let's
Oh, I know.
screw this kid.
And by the
just
way,
forget it.
There's, I think the most heartbreaking part of the movie for me is he's, I forget what he's probably. John Lennon died. That's what it
Yeah.
was. And then he told his son, he's like, well, you wouldn't understand. You wouldn't understand. He's like, yes, I do. I understand what music is. Like, yeah, I can't hear it in the same way that you can. But then the next thing is him sitting on a speaker playing music pretty loud and listening to it through vibrations. And that is true for a lot of deaf people. He tells a story sort of, about Beethoven, whatever, and everybody's kind of aware, at least Beethoven in his later years became deaf, and some of his last couple symphonies were, written after he'd pretty much lost most of his hearing. Not all of his hearing, by the way, but that he would, apocryphally anyway, he would sit on the floor and bang out the keys on the piano and stuff. But there are people like Evelyn Glennie, who's a percussionist, a marimba player, who's a wonderful marimbist, who is legally deaf, very, very nearly entirely deaf, plays barefoot, usually on a raised platform of some kind, so she can hear through her feet, through the vibrations and whatnot, and plays marimba. She's really, really good. It's possible. It's absolutely possible for people to do this kind of stuff. It's hard, and getting great at it is got to be one of the most challenging things anybody could do. But it's weird to be the father of somebody and then just meh.
Just like, oh, you couldn't possibly understand what I care about.
You can't understand me. But I think there's a good
and
connection.
I don't care to understand
and I don't
you.
even going to try. So for our Patreon movie that we're going to be talking about, Secondhand Lions, the main point of that movie, just for a little bit of spoiler, is how to be a man. Yeah. And boy, Mr. Holland could use a couple lessons from...
Could have used Hub McCann's speech.
Yeah, from Uncle Hub. Yeah.
I think,
in my opinion, being a man and being a father to boys, that's your most important job. And no matter what other your profession is, that's your most important thing to do on this earth. And he is just terrible father, husband, decent teacher. Yeah. Okay.
Like
priorities are maybe not aligned.
Not great. Not great. Yeah. If I ignored my husband the way that Mr. Holland ignores his wife, or if I treated my children the way that Mr. Holland treats his son, they would leave me and I would deserve it. There's just absolutely no call for that. That is not how you treat other humans, much less the 2 most important humans in your life. Yeah. Get over yourself, please.
Definitely. Any sort of final thoughts on Mr. Holland's Opus? Because I will say, just before going into this conversation, I was at kind of a middling territory. And then the more we talked, and the more Paul and I talked even before this, the more like my thought about this movie kind of kept dropping down a little bit more. It's a competently made movie in a lot of ways. I mean, it's a very 90s sort of drama
Yeah, very 90s.
kind of thing. Family movie, whatever. But when you really start thinking about who he is and how he is framed, he gets a lot of adoration for not being a very good person.
Yep.
Which I think is not really what the movie wanted me to think.
Yes, it was. It was like, oh, he's a good guy, but then he also has an emotional affair with a 17-year-old girl.
Yeah, it's a lot of just weird,
Yeah.
Awkward. So, a lot of times, especially the third act, I'm just thinking, man, wouldn't it be great if these kids and these parents would have a little choice in where they could go and get their schooling, and maybe if there were some incentives where, hey, maybe this guy is such a good teacher, he can go teach somewhere without these budget constraints and really reach these kids. I wonder, wouldn't that be a great world to live in?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be?
Well,
I will say that there was a particularly poignant moment in this film that has absolutely nothing to do with what we have been talking about. And this is like in the late 60s, I think, where he teaches a struggling student to play the bass drum.
Terrence Howard.
Yeah, Terrence
Yeah.
Howard.
Was
this his
Young
first role?
Terrence
This
Howard,
might have
yeah.
been young Terrence Howard.
Yes. Who
Lewis Russ, I believe his name is.
Who is then killed in the Vietnam War.
Yeah.
And that was a moment that I had to pause the movie and just have a little bit of a cry.
Yeah.
And like my kids are like, "Mommy, why are you crying?" And I have to explain. I'm like,
Yeah.
the Vietnam War was one of the most useless wastes of human life. They're like, "Why were we even fighting there?" I was like, "We shouldn't have been." Like, that's the whole thing. That's the whole point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the first moment really. So I mentioned the clarinet player, and that's sort of his entry into like, oh, maybe I can do okay at this. And I do think this is interesting because Lewis Russ, Terrence Howard's character, is a football player and a wrestler, and he's already been kicked off of the football team because his grades aren't good enough. So his coach, played by Jay Thomas, who actually I like in this role, although
he's
commentary aside,
he's the best. He's the best character.
he is actually probably
Yeah.
the best person
Yes.
in the show.
100%.
But he goes to Mr. Holland. They're friends at this point. They're buddies as teachers, and he says, "Look, I've already lost him from the football team. I don't want to lose him from the wrestling team. Can he join band? He just needs a class that he can get an A in, like any class. Is there anything that you can do? Can you put him in your band?" And I will say, this approach does annoy me a little bit because you do get this kind of thing with band where people are taking band just to get an A, and then you got a bunch of bad people. But to the character's credit, to Lewis Russ's credit, he goes in and says, "I will work as hard as it takes to learn how to do this," and he's not very good when he starts.
Reminded me of the opening scene in The Jerk.
Yeah, I haven't seen The Jerk in a long time. It's probably not a movie for this series.
Just being able to keep the beat.
Just being able to keep the beat. He's struggling really, really hard. But the thing that I was going to mention though is that Mr. Holland gives up on him again to being not actually a great teacher. But he gives up on him. He's having dinner with the football coach, with Jay Thomas's character, and he says, "Well, this kid, I don't think he's going to make. I don't think I can teach him." And Jay Thomas flat out says, "Well, then you're a bad teacher."
Yep.
And that is the thing that ultimately turns him back and goes, "Well, geez, okay, fine. I'll go back and try again. I'll try harder." And the kid ends up being, perfectly good. He's in the drum line, plays bass drum, does a great job. They start a marching band, does a great job.
His parents are super proud.
His parents are super, super proud, which is
Stays
fun.
on the wrestling team.
Yeah, which is that is a great moment. And then, of course, like you said, the tragedy of the 70s, then or late 60s and 70s. But It is interesting though that like the one of the best moments of him learning how to be a better teacher really comes from peer pressure from his fellow teacher telling him that he's bad.
An actually
Yeah.
good teacher.
Who is actually good.
Yeah.
Who's actually won't give up on the students.
Right.
Actually does care about them. Does want them all to succeed and everything else. But I think that should wrap our
Yeah.
discussion, Mr. Holland's Opus. I don't know if I would recommend this movie per se. It's fine. I think if it's on, you might want to check it out. But honestly, what I really say, and this is a little self-serving, is join us on Patreon. Stick around for the Patreon bonus because we're going to talk about Secondhand Lions, which is one of my favorite movies, actually.
It's a much better movie.
I love that movie for a lot of reasons. It is a very sweet, sort of overly saccharine movie that sometimes people are a little bit down on, but it is, for me, kind of a hidden gem. And just after the break, we will talk about that with our patrons. So thank you for everybody who is listening or watching on YouTube, and we will see you next time.